Welcome back. Well, the 5G fight, the 5G opportunity. Huawei's Chief Technology Officer, Paul Scanlon, says that if the United States wants to build its own 5G infrastructure, the process will be a challenge. This is the Trump administration plans a crackdown on China over the use of U.S. technology to manufacture Huawei chip technology. Joining me right now is the Undersecretary of State for Economic Growth, Energy and the Environment, Keith Krach. And it is great to see you, Secretary. Thanks for being here.
By the way, it's so great to be back on your show, Maria. You know, now is leading economic diplomacy for the United States State Department after all those years of being a Silicon Valley CEO.
I interviewed you when you were the CEO of Ariba. You were the CEO of DocuSign. I remember you and I spending time on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange.
Yep.
And you were there building these companies. You just told me how well Ariba is doing and DocuSign as well. Congratulations.
Well, thanks so much. I appreciate it. And now it's just a great privilege to give back to the country that has given so much to my family and me.
Especially at this moment in time where there's this big fight over Huawei and over China and what China is doing. Assess the story for us first. Put it in context in terms of what the threats are around China.
Yeah, well, I think the threats are, you know, they are playing the long game. They're playing for keeps. They're playing a four-dimensional game of military, diplomatic, economic, cultural
They want to be number one in all of that.
They've stated that the global dominant superpower. So
you're working on economic security for this country. How do we do that? How do we stay secure when you got all these countries coming at us, in particular China, the most aggressive?
Yeah, well, I look at it as a three-pronged strategy. So the first one is really it's the American model of freedom and pro-growth and innovation and optimism, because a lot of these countries are looking at China's model versus the American model. And I mean, what a great time, because results speak for themselves when you look at all those metrics and the great job President Trump has done.
Yeah.
The second one is really leverage the innovation and the resources of the private sector. This is where I think the greatest opportunity lies, at least in my mind. And then the third one is further strengthen our relationships with our allies, partners, and friends, and really build a trusted economic growth network of like-minded nations, companies, and civil society.
To make sure the world understands the threat that China represents, to have allies around this issue. But I want to get back to the private sector, because you come from the private sector. This is something that you know really well, and yet you've got resistance from, well, the resist movement. Look what happened at Oracle and the Silicon Valley protests. Oracle employees walking out yesterday over founder Larry Ellison's fundraiser for President Trump. This is another example of this ongoing fight over the Pentagon's Jedi cloud contract awarded to Microsoft. Google originally had the contract. It dropped out due to employee protests. Political tensions are high. I mean, what do you do in a situation where you know that there are certain companies that you need to work with? I mean, the jewel of Google is their AI business, and their AI business is sitting there in Beijing, you know, and then you've got these protests. We don't want to work with the department. Look what happened at Oracle. How do you deal with that?
Well, you know, one of the things that I did right at the beginning of the year, I hosted Secretary Pompeo out in Silicon Valley, and we talked about the China challenge. We talked about military-civilian fusion. We gave them some examples. We actually had everybody go around the room and tell their China story. And, you know, in Silicon Valley, we always say corporate responsibility is social responsibility, but it's also corporate responsibility is national security.
Definitely.
And the threats to democracy are real and urgent, and the threats to the companies are real and urgent because the Chinese government wants to put particularly the high-tech companies out of business.
Yeah, and not only that, but they want to learn everything they can from us. I had Andy Purdy on the other day, the chief security officer at Huawei, who continues to deny that there are back doors in Huawei equipment. And I've said this now for years. I keep sparring with Andy Purdy, saying, I have evidence that you guys settled with a number of companies because you stole their trade secrets and because there are back doors, with those back doors going right to the Chinese Communist Party, right?
And by the way, anybody who comes from the software business or high-tech business knows that Not only is it back doors, but there's a front door every few days because they're always updating software. You know, that's one of the things as we go out and we talk to government officials, and, you know, they say, hey, it's going to be so expensive to do this upgrade. We signed the deal, no back doors. We're just going to put them on the edge. It comes down to, Maria, who do you trust? Because there's that front door every day. And by the way, also there's the National Intelligence Act in China that says any company, state-owned or otherwise, or any citizen has to turn over any information, proprietary technology, intellectual property, data, or genetics to the Communist Party.